Good day to you, ladies and gentlemen of the internet. It's your boy, Jack Slack. This is the Fights Gone By podcast, episode 74. And boy, has a lot happened since the last time we spoke. My last week was essentially writing stuff that then became completely pointless by the end of the week. I started the week writing Felder versus Iaquinta. That fight was scrapped. I was writing Habib versus Tony. That fight fell through. Habib versus Holloway was booked. I wrote most of that piece. You can check that out at the Fight Primer. I put it up. It's called The Lost Fight. And then that fight fell through. So it was not a good week work-wise. And had I recorded a podcast on any one of those days, it would have rapidly gone out of date. So now we're in retrospect a little bit. We can look back and none of this will go out of date, hopefully. Unless Habib pops and they award the belt to Iaquinta or something like that. But in the meantime, we'll do the star ratings, we'll do the news, and then we'll get into the fights. You know the order by now. I suspect there's a couple in here that'll upset some people, but let's just go through it. Clark versus Rodriguez, 1 star. Rawlings versus Evan Smith, 1 star. Aubin Mercier versus Dunham, 2.5. Kovitch versus Herrig, 2.25. Lozon versus Grits, 3. Bokniak versus Magomed Shapirov, 4.5. Moicano versus Keita, 4. Ioanni and Jacek versus Rose Namajunas, 2. 3.5, not 2, sorry. 2, the second matchup. JJ versus Namajunas, 3.5. Habib versus Iaquinta, 2.75. There's your star ratings. Get good and angry. We're going to do some news. So, where to begin this week? Well, since the last time we spoke, Conor McGregor re-emerged onto the MMA scene and quickly got himself arrested. If you missed it, it was a pre-UFC 223 event. Some twats from the Mac Life, which has now fallen below MMA Imports in my order of respect for other publications, or websites rather. They let Conor McGregor and a crew of morons in, containing Charlie Ward. Why would you take Charlie Ward to a fist fight? With UFC caliber fighters, at least. But yeah, let him through. They ran down to wherever the fighters were all on the bus, and Conor McGregor did his usual, I'm going to throw stuff at this thing, but no one actually held him back, so he did actually have to throw the things. Threw a dolly. It smashed into the window of the bus and sprayed glass all over Michael Chiesa and Ray Borg and some other lad too, but he wasn't a fighter, so nobody really cared. But in the course of doing this, Conor McGregor managed to cancel 3 different fights, almost 4, because Rose Namajunas was shook by it. And I don't mean that in like the ironic sense. I mean, you've just been attacked on a bus. It's pretty unpleasant. And there were like 10 dudes there with McGregor, so could well have ended up much worse. So Chiesa is pulled by the commission. Ray Borg is pulled, I think, by the UFC doctor with corneal abrasions, and Namajunas almost pulled, and then glad she didn't because the fight was good. And then Artem Lobov, who this all was around, was pulled from his fight too. So because of Conor McGregor, 6 fighters don't get paid. No one cares about Artem Lobov because he's hanging on Conor McGregor's every pube. But 5 fighters who didn't have anything to do with the altercation and didn't deserve to miss out on their big opportunity, miss out on fighting on TV, and miss out on their pay. The UFC said they're going to reimburse them somehow, but if that doesn't include win money, then you are still suffering an opportunity cost. The funniest part of this whole thing, well, I say funniest, also most depressing, is that there are people online like defending Conor McGregor. I had a long chat with some lad who was saying, well, yeah, but I heard Chiesa was having a hard weight cut. Anyway, I'm sure he was glad for the excuse. And my response was like, you can imagine he was thinking whatever you want, but he's never missed weight. He's always had a big weight cut. A load of glass in his face and the commission removing him from the fight against his will. You don't get to justify that by being like, yeah, he probably didn't want to fight anyway. Didn't want to make his living. Just the dumbest shit. And Ray Borg, when people list Ray Borg as a top quality win for Demetrius Johnson, I'm always like, yeah, Ray Borg's not that great, but he is nonetheless a professional fighter, and he came in prepared to fight. He was on course to make weight. He did everything that everyone has to do a fight, and then he was robbed of it at the last minute, and now he has corny celebrations, which are obviously no joke. Alex Caceres, another one who I don't really care about watching, but his fight with Artem Lobov is now off the table. He loses money for something that he wasn't involved in at all, and Habib goes on to fight anyway, so there was literally no point. I mean, obviously, this sells fights. This will, unfortunately, allow Conor McGregor to make like 2 million pay-per-view sales when he comes back to fight Habib or whoever. Diaz 3, that's the one everyone wants. Yeah, I mean, the UFC are going to say that they're going to do something about it, and they probably won't. That's the sad truth of it. I patiently wait to be proven wrong, but, what are you going to do? Fire him and send him to Bellator? He could leave the UFC. I think it was Stephen Rondina, my bro, said this on Twitter last week. It was just like, the moment the UFC sacks Conor McGregor, McGregor Enterprises instantly becomes the second biggest promotion in MMA, or the biggest, So, just, you can't do anything about it, and it's really annoying. As Jesse says in Breaking Bad, he can't keep getting away with it. Fortunately, the law probably won't look on it too kindly, and obviously New York, particularly New York City, very famous, low tolerance on crime. And he is charged with 3 accounts, I think, of misdemeanor assault, but felonious mischief, criminal mischief, which I forgot that that's actually a legal term, because when you say mischievous, it's such a great word. But yeah, the felony is the criminal mischief, not the assault part, which is the NYPD low-key calling McGregor a bitch who didn't even mean to hurt anyone and was just making a scene. But anyway, so all that happened, robbed of a load of good fights on that card, and Conor McGregor was finally stripped of his lightweight title. It's amazing that it took this to happen. And then they stripped Tony Ferguson, which is an even bigger joke. You had him ready to fight for the title against Habib. Habib didn't show up. He fought Kevin Lee, a much better fighter than Al Iaquinta, and a guy who'd had a full camp. And he won the title, and you said, okay, he's the interim. So as soon as we strip Conor McGregor, and then you strip both of them and give it to Habib because you want the Habib-Conor fight, and you don't want Tony Ferguson getting in the way. Daft shit. Anyway, the real kicker of this is that I finished rewriting the rewrites on Notorious 2 days before this happened, and then my publisher got back to me like, yeah, we might need to write something else now. You will be pleased to know that the last paragraph of the new rewrite of Notorious is like, it basically lists him as the worst UFC champion in history, the most detrimental to the UFC as a league, if he is the most successful to the UFC as a brand. And just says that he's at a fork in the road. He could take the money and run, or he could turn up and fight, but he's now notorious for all the wrong reasons. And then he did this, and basically just proved that, yeah, that's true. So fuck Conor McGregor for that. I mean, there's no way you can defend that, even if you like him, And Charlie Ward standing there, just looking like a tit the entire time. What else happened? Brock Lesnar re-signed with the WWE. If you saw WrestleMania at the weekend, he beat Roman Reigns, which was the one that nobody expected. Everyone thought Roman's getting put over. Roman eats 5 F5s and then gets pinned. And everyone was like, well, that's the blow-off to the year of build. And it turns out it's probably because they were desperately trying to keep Brock. So he's with the WWE again. Jeremy Bottas reporting that he'll be fighting the winner of Stipe versus DC. I very much doubt it. But, he might have news that we don't. Maha Sakurai's returning for an exhibition against Gomi at age 42. Really more sad news than anything, but I do love Sakurai. Like, I would watch him in a grappling match with Gomi. That'd be great. Or a combat wrestling match. Get the singlets out. The UFC is planning a fourth quarter event in Seoul, or Seoul? Seoul? Is it Seoul? I forget. The capital of South Korea. And it's going to be headlined by the Korean Zombie. He really is marvellous because he's a very good and respected fighter, but he sort of exists outside the rankings. He had his comeback fight this year, did well, everyone loved it, but nobody really considers him when they're talking about like top featherweights. They don't say like, how about Moicano versus Korean Zombie or whatever. He's just sort of bobbing along there in a league of his own, but he has star power and people will watch him. He's a guaranteed good fight. And if you take him to Korea, even better. Now, if they hadn't if they hadn't let Benson Henderson get away, that would be a great card to have him on too. And obviously, Doo-Ho Choi, both of the Dong-Hyun Kims. Oh wait, no, didn't Dong-Hyun Spinning Kim get cut? I can't remember. Ricardo Lamas versus Bektik is booked for UFC 225. Like that, couple of good grindy boys. One of them a bit more active on the ground than the other. Lamas more in the wheel kick and stand at range and then try and lay and pray business. And then the most interesting piece of news for me personally is just broken like today. Brett Okamoto is reporting that Nick Diaz's suspension comes to an end on April 19th. They made a deal with whoever it was, the State Athletic Commission. So from a week and a little bit, he will be able to fight. I said throw him straight into the title fight with Woodley so he can get laid on and retire again. But, the problem with Nick is the problem with Nate. He's a guaranteed entertaining fight if you put him in the right fight. If you put him in the fight he wants, he will lose and quit again. They are guys who recognize their value as an attraction, but think that they deserve a title shot based on that. Which is, the whole problem with this sport. We are in a sport where meritocracy isn't really a thing. You don't get paid. Conor McGregor is not hundreds of millions of dollars better than the rest of the fighters in his division. He's he's considerably better as an attraction. He's not that much better a fighter. A lot of what happens in the fight game isn't really deserved, or about deserved rather. Anyway, that's some news covered. Let's have a look at these fights. And there were some real stinkers on this one, but also I believe my highest rated fight to date. So a quick look at the averages to I'm really only keeping them to sort of entertain myself and just see how the overall events rank out and how I remember them versus the number. And it's coming out a little bit weird. UFC 222, which was where we started our star ratings, averaged 2.6 recurring. Fight Night London Verdum versus Volkov, that averaged 2.95, which is our highest so far, and UFC 223 averaged 2.72 recurring. So that puts us this in the second most entertaining event we've covered. I don't know if I remember it as that in my head, but the numbers don't lie, or maybe they do. So the night started with Devin Clark versus Mike Rodriguez. This was a light heavyweight fight. They always jerk the curtain with these light heavyweight fights, and they're always shit. 1 star I gave this, just a flat 1. I've got slow, sloppy slog along the fence. Dog shit written down. Basically this. Devin Clark kept pressing the much taller man towards the fence. Mike Rodriguez would get stuck there and occasionally fall on his hands, and Devin Clark would try and take his back. It was not a good fight. Neither of these men is catching my attention. There's some serious work needs to be done there if they want to start getting towards title contention. Or maybe there isn't, because it's light heavyweight. Ashley Evans Smith versus Beck Rawlins. This was... I said when I was watching this, doing the star ratings, I tweeted out, this is the most juggalo fight I've ever seen. Both these girls have the trashiest tattoos and hair. And that's saying something, because I watched MMA in like 2003, and there was some really bad tattoos back then. Beck Rawlins, everyone's a bit sick of. Ashley Evans Smith, everyone feels like they own a debt to after her defeating of... Who was it? Fuck. The transgender guy. Or girl, whichever is correct. Fallon Fox, that's the one. But yeah, firstly, I noticed that the opening package for this, where they shadow box and then look at the camera, they made these girls look really greasy. It was like Christina Aguilera's Dirty, but not at all sexy. And then the fight was just really bad. But if you saw Ronda Rousey's punching this weekend against Triple H, where she goes yeah in the corner like Shane O'Mac, it looked ultra unrealistic. But then I watched this fight after that, and it was actually better, the punching in Rousey's fight, than in this fight. Ashley Evans Smith just pumping 1-2s. It reminded me of Matt Riddle versus Sean Pearson. He's pumping these 1-2s, walking forward, and he's missing, except in women's MMA, it works. So Ashley Evans Smith's just walking forward, pumping 1-2s, and Brett Rawlins is eating them. fucking nothing else happens. Like, the first 2 fights on this card reminded me of the key difference between what's wrong with light heavyweight and heavyweight MMA and what's wrong with women's MMA. Light heavyweight MMA, everyone hits hard enough that they don't need to learn any technique and it's just jank. Women's MMA, everyone's light enough that they can't really hit hard enough, so they just wade in with jank technique and get countered, but nothing happens. Yeah, really bad representation of both weight classes here. 1 star, don't watch. Olivier Aubin-Mercier and Evan Dunham. Aubin-Mercier I've always quite enjoyed. Really nice southpaw jab on this lad, but he's from TriStar, so what do you expect? But this one really tested the star system, because quick finishes normally get a good amount of stars, because I just say, like, well, it was exciting and probably a must-watch from this card. But this quick finish was really underwhelming. He got hit with a knee, and I think it was either floating rib or solar plexus. They kept saying liver. Your liver's huge, so it could have been liver, but it looked a little bit more central than that to me. But yeah, it winded Dunham and sent him to the mat, and it was really quick and sort of just as the fight was getting going, 53 seconds. So I got this down as 2.5 because I don't think it was must-watch. The actual action wasn't tremendous. And the finish was more a curiosity than it was like, wow, hit him clean in the whatever. It's just weird that he went down off it. But yeah, I'm excited for the future of Aubin-Mercier. And Evan Dunham wasn't looking bad until he got hit in the off switch with 1 blow. So yeah, not terrible, but not really worth catching up on if you missed it. Karolina Kovitch versus Felice Herrig. I gave this 2.25. I was kind of torn on this because Karolina always walks forward and does shit, you know. She's actually got a decent right hand on her. It's just that everything else about her game is kind of lacking. And Felice Herrig just stood there. I've got decent women's scrap, but footwork is appalling, and terrible Imanari roll attempt by Karolina Kovitch. But yeah, went pretty much how you expected. Kovitch got the win, sets up the rematch with Rose, which actually could be really interesting. I think people are going to be really surprised if she comes out and smashes Rose's body again with the knees. I think people are going to be really surprised and be like, but I thought Rose had evolved so much. And it really is just styles making fights more than how much Rose has grown as a fighter. Rose just has Joanna's number. Her style is very well suited to dealing with someone who really likes opponents to be up in their face the whole time. Joe Lauzon versus Chris Gruetzemacher, or Grits as we'll call him from now on. This one started out really... I didn't like this to begin with, but I ended up giving it a 3. Lots and lots of hand fighting, like more than you will see in any fight except maybe Robbie Lawler versus Johnny Hendricks or Chris Weidman versus Lyoto Machida. Lots of elbows and body shots. I've written down Lauzon not using movement at all, but he's never been one to use movement. You know, we saw that really obviously in the Jim Miller fight. And a few of his fights, really. He sort of is more of a cover-up guy than a guy who's going to use his movement to stay out of range. He'll take punches rather than avoid them. Unfortunately, having his hands up nice and high to guard just meant that Grits could get to his body and turn over elbows on him. Really got bloodied up quite badly, and the fight was called off between round 1 and round 2. I thought Lauzon started really strong. He did some cool stuff. Hit him with a ton of 1-2s. Grits' boxing doesn't seem to be tremendous. He was just eating these 1-2s alternately, like Beck Rollins. But then Lauzon went for a shot, failed, and pulled butterfly guard and tried to make some stuff happen from there, and I really enjoyed that. He is a very exciting technical fighter on the ground, but he is very much in the twilight of his career now. This is 3 in a row, I believe, that he's dropped. You know, he's a guaranteed finish machine, but the finishes are starting to tally up more towards him being finished than his opponent. But I thought Lauzon's corner did a great job calling it off between round 1 and round 2. You'd never ever see that in MMA. Good for them. Bokniak versus Magomed Shapirov. So someone wrote on Reddit, 5 stars or we riot for this one. But I gave it 4.5, which I believe is my highest to date. I really enjoyed this. Magomed Sharipov, rather. I've been getting that wrong, but we knew that I was getting it wrong. I was actually more surprised with how close I've been getting. Magomed Sharipov or Zabit, what I find about him is that he is John Jones up to and including the Shogun fight. By that I mean there is a very clear divider when John Jones is just winging it and going for whatever he wants, and then when John Jones today is a methodical wrecking machine. John Jones up to the Shogun fight, he's just leaping around and doing whatever he wants. But he only really became the fighter that he is now when he started planning for his opponents and actually using some tactical science in conjunction with his amazing skills. Magomed Shapirov, his boxing is still like a bit of a well, I suppose that's another Jones comparison. He doesn't really use his hands tremendously well. But yeah, I thought Bochniak, my main thought coming out of this was Bochniak could have made that fight much better with a few more tools and a smarter corner. I thought, he clearly wasn't in trouble at any phase. He was a tough lad who didn't seem to really be close to getting finished. Even when he had Zabit on his back, he was shaking him off. Never seemed wobbled. He got hit in the mouth. He got hit on the point of the chin while his mouth was open screaming, and he was fine. So clearly he can take a shot. And he was just sort of marching towards Magomed Shapirov and trying to wing right hands at him. And where his corner should have been saying, step across, cut the cage, or throw some low kicks, they were just saying, throw more punches. I want 4 punches in a row. And the problem was that Shapirov did... In fact, this is one of the interesting things it showed in Shapirov. People expect flaws to be shown, and we're really looking for habits. Habits are the things you can train for and exploit. Flaws, really, unless they're... Some guys have blind areas, like Edson Barbosa can't move off a straight line, but most of the time we're looking for habits, and Zabit's habits, Zabit's habit was that 95% of the time that he broke the line of attack when Bochniak came in, he pivoted off to his left. So he pivoted around his lead foot clockwise. And when you do that, you leave that lead foot there as a weight-bearing strut, but you are turning your knee inwards, so you're presenting the back of your leg, which is the part that you want to kick, and it's planted there, and your weight's on it. When guys go to that pivot so often, the low kick is a must. And that's something that I guarantee you Bochniak can low kick. You don't get to the UFC without being able to low kick. It just reminds me of the Conor McGregor-Nate Diaz fight when I said before the second one, yep, this time I'll probably just kick him in the leg until he's falling over and then use the left hand. And people were going, have you seen Conor McGregor's low kicks? They showed me this clip of him throwing Thai kicks on a bag from 2009 and they were shit. And I was like, the thing about low kicks is you don't need to be good at them, you just need to use them. Dan Henderson was one of the most effective fighters with his low kicks despite having shit low kicks. It's what they do and set up that's important, and what they exploit in the opponent. But yeah, he was pivoting around that leg constantly. That leg was ripe for low kicking, and that would have slowed Zabit down sooner, because Zabit was slowing down by the end. The fact that he got caught along the fence and they were doing those trades just sort of showed that Zabit's feet were starting to slow. But if he'd been kicking him in the leg the whole time, definitely would have had an easier time. I think Bochniak needs to get to a better camp, and he'll do a lot better. His corner just didn't offer him anything between rounds except throw more punches, throw in 4s and 5s, and 4s and 5s don't work on a straight line if the guy's moving offline. Lots of interesting stuff from Magomed Shapirov, trips and semi-suplexes and jumping back kicks to intercept. A little bit of my boy Khalidov in there, and some nice stance switches to land left kicks on the open side to the body and the head. And this was a good fight because you had a guy who was seen as a technician, but you saw a lot of flaws in his technique when he was pushed with sort of reckless aggression. And the pace of the fight and the two different styles, it really just all came together in my mouth to make a gorgeous tasting fight. So 4.5, must watch. And then it was followed by the second, the only other must-watch fight of the night, Moicano versus Keita. Completely different dynamic of fight, definitely not as high pace. People were booing because you had Bochniak versus Magomed Sharapov, and then you went into Moicano versus Keita. You were probably going to be coming down a bit. I'm sure a lot of people ducked out to get a hot dog or whatever, but or churros. Oh, that was the best event I ever went to. Glory 8. They served churros, and I've never been to another fight event where they served churros. I had one with what's his name, Masaki Noiri. Yeah, just standing by the churro stand. It was great. But Moicano versus Keita, really good fight. I was writing a tactical guide for this one, and I could tell you that I was writing whatever I want. I could be like, I said exactly this would be what they do. But I wanted Moicano to target the lead leg, and I wanted Keita to work the jab, because Keita's style, you see him get in and out with the jab wonderfully, and that comes from that upright stance with the feet quite spread. Boxing in MMA boxing generally is facilitated by the feet. And having your feet wide and your nice upright stance and you're on top of your hips, your center of gravity is a nice straight line upwards. And that's what boxing is. You're in and out, you're beautifully gliding. But that really exposes you to the lead leg. You've got to have the leg out there to be able to do that. So I was suggesting that Moicano time the low kicks, try and get them after the jabs or on the jab. You can slip a jab. You can go inside a jab and land the right low kick, which is an Ernesto Hoost favourite. You can take the jab on your guard or your face even, and then low kick immediately after. There's a lot of ways to do it. Moicano landed a couple of really good ones that jarred Keita's leg early. The nice thing about as the guy's coming down to jab or just leaving from the jab is if he's just leaving where he was or landing, that's where his weight is moving, and you can crack that leg and buckle it and really hurt him. Not so much when the leg's up in the air being picked up, not so much when the leg is fully planted on the floor. If you can catch him just when the weight is changing, either in or out, that's when you can hurt a guy really badly. But he jarred his legs his lead leg quite early. And then what I liked was Moicano. I've often thought of him as a guy with like that Brazilian Muay Thai. And when I say Brazilian Muay Thai, I mean when they throw straight punches, their elbows come out to the side and they look like they're paddling a canoe. The Betch Correa punching form. But Moicano's hands looked sharp here. I thought they looked really good. And he combined them well with his feet. And he switched stances at several points to go southpaw and use the right uppercut to lift the head and then throw the left body kick or high kick. That is a Yodson Klai favourite. It's a really nice way. The uppercut to stand people up. I'm a huge fan of that. You're very rarely going to, especially a fighter like Keita, you're not going to crack him with an uppercut on the chin because they're not bent forward fighters. They're an upright fighter. He did land a good uppercut on the nose, which is the sort of like best you could hope for against an upright fighter, like BJ Penn against St. Pierre. Caught him with an uppercut that he probably shouldn't have thrown, but because he was upright and he caught just the end of his nose, he managed to tear his nose all open. But you're not going to like knock out an upright guy with an uppercut. But it does keep them upright, which then opens them up for the body kick and the head kick. There was a lot of talking about Keita checking kicks. Keita was trying to pull the leg away from the kick, which is what I was going to talk about in my pre-fight. I was going to suggest that he did that. Withdraw the lead leg and then jump back in with the 1-2. The problem was that he'd already had his leg jarred and he was doing it so slowly. Once you've eaten a few low kicks, it's a lot harder to start defending them. That's why you've got to get to it early and just stop that shit before it even starts. But you really notice this, like, by the midpoint, Keita was throwing these long right hands, leaning way ahead of himself, and trying to get in to punch without planting the foot and placing it in range, which is obviously impossible. So he was off balance, and Moicano was leaning back and catching him with check hooks and things. Really nice stuff. Moicano has quickly become one of my favourite fighters. He's a very interesting guy. And as I tweeted this week, you can tell he's pretty good because he got to the UFC and he's still got a very pointy face. And then after the fight, I was honoured to receive the call for this fight and this, that, and the other. It just seems like a cool guy, but very skilled striker and getting better. Keita, I enjoy him a lot. I think he's still got tons left in the tank. I think he just didn't get to the kicks early enough. I think he had the right idea trying to pull away and then come back with counters, but he got smashed early. And once your legs start to go, if you're a very movement-based fighter, you are at a massive disadvantage. This is why anytime I say, whenever we're talking about fighting Dominic Cruz, TJ Dillashaw, Demetrius Johnson, don't wait to kick him in the legs till late, like TJ did against Dillashaw. Like, the first good low kick he landed, he jarred his leg. And afterwards it was all, oh, but he had plantar fasciitis. It doesn't matter. He hurt him with the low kick. You know, if he'd gone to it sooner and more consistently, the same thing could have happened earlier on. But if you're going to kick a guy's legs to stop his mobility, you've got to do it early. Otherwise, you're dropping rounds to that mobility. I think if this had gone 5, I could have seen Moicano finishing. I look forward to seeing more of Moicano. I'm glad he's getting the respect he deserves. They were saying, I was seeing some people saying after this, it wouldn't be great to see Zabit fight Moicano. Yes, it would. I would love that. Because you've got a guy who's got probably more natural talent against a guy who's got definitely more, or has demonstrated far more fight smarts. And I don't think Zabit would be able to get away with just overwhelming him. But the problem is obviously that Moicano has good wins over good names, and he had a fight with Ortega, who's about to fight for the title, and for most of that fight he was tooling Ortega, so I don't think he'd want to risk it against a guy with no standing, which is the problem that Zabit's going to face. And this is something that I've wanted to talk about for a while. Actually, I might write something about it this week or next week, because it's the same thing that's happening with my boy Ryan Hall. You know, and we talked about it with Nate Diaz and Nick Diaz. You want to fight better people, but if you don't have any standing, those people won't want to fight you. You know, like if Ryan Hall isn't ranked as a was he featherweight, bantamweight? Featherweight, because he fought Gray Maynard. If Ryan Hall isn't ranked in the top 15 at featherweight, no one's going to accept a fight with him from the top 15 if they have the option not to. You know, it's very tricky. You've got to. It's hard. That's why it's called campaigning for a title shot. You know, it's a tricky business. Anyway, Joanna Jędrzejczyk versus Rose Namajunas. I gave this a 3.5. I mean, the first fight I'd have given like a 4.5 or maybe even a 5 because it was one of the best performances I've ever seen and it came out of nowhere. This fight was far more closely contested. Joanna made some changes, but they just weren't enough. What I really liked in this fight was Namajunas firstly using the jab and always jab and duck, jab and dip, jabbing off to the right side, jabbing off to the left side, jabbing straight down the centre. She's always moving her upper body. Her trunk movement is very good. You know, she doesn't have the form of like a well-trained, lifelong boxer, but she's got the tactics and the science there. You know, Roberto Duran, known as a brilliant defensive fighter, but the jab and duck was a huge part of his game. He'd just jab, and his head would move immediately after he jabbed to wherever he thought he needed to be. He wasn't jab, wait for the counter, and then slip it as you see it. He was jab, and when the jab's coming back, his head was already somewhere else. He's making himself a difficult target rather than trying to respond to what the opponent's doing. And it's a very nice way of counterpunching offensively because you're putting yourself in positions where the opponent will probably miss. And the idea is that you duck to a different angle or you retreat or whatever each time you jab. You've got to be somewhere different. You can't keep showing them the same look, otherwise they'll uppercut you while you're leaning that way, or head kick you if it's MMA. But it's a nice way of not having to try and work on just reactions all the time when you're looking for counter punches. And the other nice thing that Namajunas did was that she was doing this off the right-hand lead as well. There were points in this fight, I think it was about the second round and then onwards, she worked out she could score with like a flicking right-hand lead, so square your body up and then flick it, rather than turn your body into a full punch. And that was a Roy Jones favourite. He used to get almost square with his right hand up, and then he'd push it in the opponent's face, like just the arm, and then come back with a fully loaded up left hook. And she was using the right-hand lead and then ducking in and looking for a counter, or right-hand lead, drop away and look for a counter right hand, which I've not seen anyone doing in the UFC, so that was very cool. Joanna Jędrzejczyk went to the low kicks, which was a great idea because, again, Namajunas has a nice long stance. She uses footwork in and out a lot. If you jar the legs, it's going to be problematic. It was basically the opposite of Moicano versus Keita, or rather, she was trying to do the same thing, and Namajunas was doing fairly well dealing with it. One of the things that Namajunas is very good at doing is taking the low kick and stepping in with the right hand. You've seen it against Kovitch, and she's done it against Jędrzejczyk a few times now. She dropped her in the first fight off this, but taking the low kick and coming in with the right hand immediately. Great way to dissuade people from kicking, because then if you're Joanna Jędrzejczyk, you've got this problem. I want to low kick her, but if I jab twice before I low kick, she knows as soon as I've dropped that jab, I'm going to be low kicking. It's how do you set the low kick up without telling them that the low kick's coming. I was kind of disappointed that Jędrzejczyk's corner didn't have her going for clinches, because when Namajunas ducked into the clinch, she only did it a few times, but she ate a couple of knees with Joanna's back to the fence. She was still like visibly recoiling from these knees. And then she went to her corner, and Trevor Whitman said, "Don't go into the clinch on if you get the choice, you don't go into the clinch. We're staying out of it. We're using science, not strength," and so on. Clearly, still an issue for her being in the clinch and eating knees. And there was a nice elbow landed in the clinch too, and that was something that I said that Joanna should be really looking for. I think Joanna was more concerned with making this a striking match, when she would have done better just going forward, jabbing and trying to duck into clinches, and then trying to strike with her from within the clinch. If you can push her to the fence and break away and land some elbows, or elbow into a flurry, things like that. Cain Velasquez versus JDS, where you're boxing the guy up with punches and combinations, but you're doing it by breaking out of clinches. You're starting at closest range and moving outwards, rather than trying to do it on the way in, where you're telegraphing everything with your steps. I think JJ did well. I don't agree with all her nonsense afterwards about being the queen, but yeah, Namajunas did a really good job. And there was a really, really nice moment in the final round, I think it was, when Namajunas sort of stepped it up and decided she was going to fight more aggressively. Very dangerous to do, because that's what Joanna Jędrzejczyk had wanted through the entire 6 rounds or 5 rounds, the one in the previous fight and the 4 up to this point. All she wanted was Joanna Jędrzejczyk to just come at her and be more aggressive so that she could put the jab on her face and work the counters and combinations. But good for Namajunas, she pulled it off. But she did a beautiful switch step into into southpaw lead uppercut. Gorgeous. And I think she jacked JJ's head back with it, so that was nice. There were a few interesting looks. And Joe Rogan kept saying, she might jump for an armbar here from the clinch. She does crazy stuff. And no, the way that she's become a much better fighter is that she's dropped all the crazy shit. She is a very scientific, thoughtful, methodical fighter now. And it really has paid dividends. It's made her... Again, it's like John Jones. John Jones won a title while being a crazy man. But she made herself great by dropping all the reliance on natural talent. Just fighting like someone who doesn't have the natural talent, but having the natural talent to back it up, So good fight, 3.5. I'm not saying it's must watch, because it was a bit of a slog in places, but it's going to be an important part of MMA history, so definitely give it a watch. And Habib versus Iaquinta, I gave this 2.75. I mean, the main interesting thing was, I go read the article I wrote on Max versus Habib, but none of it was used by Iaquinta. Iaquinta came out low. He was ready to stop the takedowns and fight the takedowns. He wasn't looking to use angles and prevent opportunities for them. And that very low, long stance encouraged Habib to dive for high crotches and low singles. You don't see... I saw Habib dive a long shot against Michael Johnson and get sprawled on. But generally, Habib is much better at diving in near the fence and using the fence to build his takedowns off. But he was going for low singles in this fight, and they're pretty hard without wrestling shoes on, and especially once dudes get sweaty. He finished his one in the first round, taking it up, toppling the tree, lifting it as high as possible and knocking him over. But by the later rounds, anytime he went for that single, it was slipping out. He was limp-legging away. Unfortunately, Iaquinta's complete lack of footwork in this fight meant that he was just on the end of Habib's jab the entire time. And Iaquinta doesn't really have a boxing game outside of his right hand. I thought Iaquinta did a great job surviving. I think Iaquinta did an amazing job on short notice. I think massive respect to Habib for taking this fight on short notice. I am so in favour of fighters not taking fights on short notice. If I were someone's management, I would be saying, don't do that. But obviously they put the belt on this so that Habib could... have something to fight for. I don't think Iaquinta really shows us. The problem is, in the aftermath, everyone either wants to shit on Iaquinta or project him as an all-time great or something like that. And the truth is, Iaquinta hasn't done anything important in a very long time. His last fight was in 2017 against Diego Sanchez, but the only fight he had before that was 2015 against Jorge Masvidal, in which he won a very, very questionable decision. He didn't look like he won that fight. And, people are saying, like, he's on a 5-fight win streak. And you're like, no, a streak is when you're active and doing something. He's been away for, like, 3 years or whatever. And the only person he's fought since 2015 is Diego Sanchez, a fight that didn't need to happen. Diego's been washed up for almost 10 years now. There's an awful lot we don't know about Iaquinta. He's a guy they were building as a prospect, but who kept disappearing. So he hasn't been built as a prospect. I mean, watching this hasn't convinced me that Habib is the best lightweight in the world. He's one of the best, but there's still a ton of flaws in his game. Even if he were the best, these flaws are still very evident in his game. It's so similar to the Rousey situation, you wouldn't even believe it. Go read the Max Holloway thing. Like, there are literally people telling me the same thing they did about Rousey. Well, if he misses the first clinch when you sidestep him, he'll go for another clinch. Or he doesn't have the stopping power to make him pay. You're relying on one punch. No, that's not how circling off works. You tire him out, you jab him in the face, you make him settle down, and then it's more of a normal match. The problem with Habib is that he overwhelms people, like Rousey. You can only overwhelm people if you tie them up effectively and take them down and hold them there the first time. If they're circling off each time, if you take a round just sprinting at them, you're going to have to slow down eventually. And Ronda found that within like a minute and a half against Holly Holm. He looked in great shape, but again, you can only sprint a dude so long. But then he didn't need to sprint at him at any point in this fight because he was just stood there. Anyway, not a tremendous fight. Watch it if you're invested in the Habib-Tony Conor saga. Otherwise, it was really just a foregone conclusion and it was just filler main event. Someone was saying that Dana knew that Max wouldn't get cleared, and that was just a bait and switch because they knew they were going to have a shit fight as the title fight. And I do like a good conspiracy theory. I don't think Dana's that. I can't believe that a man who has put together, well, not a man. I can't believe that a team of people who put together a card as shit as UFC 224 are playing that far ahead on this event. Anyway, so that was the card that was. I thought it was decent. Really. Moicano versus Keita, maybe it's just me looking at it as a technique head, but I loved that fight. And then Magomed Sharipov versus Bokniak, fantastic. I don't think anyone who knew fighting would say that wasn't an entertaining fight. I think a lot of people who had never seen a fight before would find that a very entertaining fight. That is why I have given it our highest accolade so far. 4.5, we'll see if anyone ever beats it. Right, just time for a quick couple of questions and then we'll get out of here for this week. Hey Jack, I've been a big fan of MMA recently and your articles and videos have been a massive help in understanding MMA. The primers especially have been a treat to watch. I understand making videos isn't your cup of tea, brackets sorry, not sorry. And that you're a writer/reporter. Oh, reporter. Someone's been talking to MMA imports first, but I was wondering if you could do more of them, possibly featuring notable fighters regardless of them fighting or not. I'd love a proper primer of Cruz, Fedor, Jones, etc. Also, what happened to Boy Watch? And they didn't leave a name with that. Yeah, mainly it's just the problem with video work is that it's time consuming, and I would love to get better at it. I'm all about learning new skills and trying to improve stuff, but there's no way for me to monetize it. And as this is my job writing, it's easier to just write than it is to do a video and then not get anything for it. If the UFC or Bellator or even if Vice were interested in these videos, I am sure that they'd be getting like hundreds of thousands of hits on their channels, and we'd be able to do it with more budget and also with me being able to invest more time into them. But at the moment, they're just a side thing that I do for fun, and if I have a lot on that week, or that month rather, I just can't do them. But if you're listening, anyone in Bellator, UFC, whatever, hit me up. Or Vice, obviously. Or Fox, they have all the rights, don't they? I forget. That was the main thing with working on Ringcraft at Vice. You have to get a lot of clearance papers for all the different clips you use. So by the end of it, they're going, Jack, you're using 30 fights in each episode. Is there any way we can cut that down? And I'm going, nah. I've got a nice long question here from my boy Philip. But I reckon I'll save that for the second podcast this week. We'll try and do one because there is an event coming up. Yay! Quick plugs. If you want to get in on the Patreon, we are doing the Ken Shamrock Tito Ortiz episode. It's going to be great fun. It'll entertain you into a living death. If you want to read Notorious, either buy it or wait for the rewrite. If you haven't gone to thefightprimer.com and bookmarked it, the Lost Fight article between Max Holloway and Habib Nurmagomedov is there for you to view now. And if you want to send a question to the podcast, fightsgonebypodcast@gmail.com. I'm your boy Jack Slack. This has been the Fights Gone By podcast, and I'll catch you next week. Max would have done